Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the center of the vast council chamber, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his 53 years of life. Around him, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling painted with star maps. The air tasted metallic and carried the scent of sulfur from the Vorthan delegates. Jake's hands were steady at his sides, but his heart pounded against his ribs. 20 years of military service had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't a battle he could win with strategy or weapons. This was politics, and humanity was losing. Dr. Lisa Grant sat in the human delegation area behind him. She had been his advisor for the past 5 years, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council. Her face was pale, and she gripped her datapad so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Next to her, Senator Kate Williams looked like she might be sick. The young diplomat had believed they could talk their way out of this mess right up until the trial began 3 days ago. The Etherian judge floated above the chamber floor, its crystalline body catching the light from dozens of different suns that streamed through the transparent walls. When it spoke, its voice echoed from speakers throughout the room, translated into thousands of languages at once. The Council has heard all evidence regarding the human species and their actions since joining our alliance, the judge said. Each word felt like a hammer blow to Jake's chest. The charges are serious. Aggressive expansion beyond approved territories. Unauthorized technology development. Disregard for established safety protocols. Most concerning of all, unpredictable behavior that threatens galactic stability. Jake wanted to shout that everything they had done was legal under Council law. Humans had followed every rule, filed every permit, asked permission for everything. But asking permission and getting it were two different things. The Council moved slowly, took years to approve simple requests. Humanity couldn't wait that long. Admiral Morrison, the judge continued, you may present your final statement. Jake stepped forward. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. He looked up at the judge and let his gaze sweep across the alien. Faces watching him. Some looked curious. Others showed disgust or fear. A few seemed almost sad. Honored representatives, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 3 years ago, a plague struck the mining colony on Kepler 442b. The Galactic Medical Authority said they would send help in 6 months. After proper studies and safety reviews, we couldn't wait 6 months. People were dying every day. He paused, remembering the emergency calls from the colony, the desperate faces on the video screens. So we sent our own medical team. Dr. Grant here led that mission. They saved over 10,000 lives in 2 weeks using methods the medical authority hadn't approved yet. Was that aggressive? Yes. Was it unpredictable? Maybe, but it was right. Senator Williams nodded behind him. She had been against that mission at the time, worried about breaking protocol. She understood now. You call our expansion aggressive, Jake continued. We've established 12 new colonies in 5 years. But we picked worlds nobody else wanted. Planets with harsh weather, dangerous radiation, unstable geology. We didn't take anything from anyone. We made homes where others saw only wasteland. The Vorthan military representative, General Kethvar, leaned forward in his seat. His species looked like giant insects covered in blue metal plates. Those worlds were deemed uninhabitable by Council survey teams, he said through his translator. Your people shouldn't be able to survive there. But we do survive, Jake replied. We adapt. We find ways to make things work. That's what humans do. The Etherian judge's crystalline body pulsed with soft light. This unpredictability is precisely what concerns the Council. Your species develops new technologies at an alarming rate. You ignore established scientific consensus. You take risks that could endanger not just yourselves, but all life in the galaxy. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. We take calculated risks to solve problems. When the Council said faster-than-light communication was impossible, we found a way to do it anyway. When you said the asteroid fields near Rigel were too dangerous to mine, we developed new ships that could work there safely. Every breakthrough we've made has been shared freely with all Council members, without proper testing periods, added the delegate from the Zelani Republic. Her species looked almost human, except for their silver skin and completely black eyes. Your quantum communicators disrupted subspace for 3 sectors when they first came online. For 6 hours, Dr. Grant said from her seat, unable to stay quiet any longer. And no one was hurt. We fixed the problem and made the design better. Judge raised one crystalline appendage for silence. The Council recognizes humanity's single quotes S. contributions, but your species represents a destabilizing influence. Your rapid expansion, your disregard for established procedures, your willingness to ignore expert advice. These behaviors cannot be tolerated in civilized space. Jake's stomach dropped. He had known this moment was coming, but hearing the words still hit like a physical blow. Therefore, the judge continued, by a vote of 31 to 16, the Galactic Council hereby orders the immediate withdrawal of all human presence from civilized space. You have 90 standard days to remove all colonies, ships, and personnel beyond the exclusion barrier. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates cheered, others argued loudly. Jake heard Senator Williams gasp behind him. The exclusion barrier marked the edge of safe, explored space. Beyond it lay dangerous star systems, unstable planets, and spatial anomalies that made travel nearly impossible. It was where the Council dumped toxic waste and sent criminals they wanted to forget about. Jake stood perfectly still as chaos swirled around him. 90 days to abandon everything humanity had built among the stars. 90 days to pack up entire worlds and disappear into the cosmic wilderness. But as the noise continued, something strange happened. Instead of despair, Jake felt a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The Council thought they were punishing humanity. They thought they were solving a problem by throwing humans into the most dangerous region of space. They had no idea what they had just done. Jake turned to face the human delegation. Dr. Grant was staring at him with wide eyes. Senator Williams looked ready to cry. Behind them, Captain Ben Parker of the U.E.'s Liberty sat with his arms crossed, looking more angry than afraid. "You think you're condemning us," Jake said, his voice carrying over the noise in the chamber. "But you're just setting us free." The chamber fell quiet again. The crystalline judge pulsed with brighter light. "Admiral Morrison," it said, "do you understand what lies beyond the exclusion barrier? The radiation storms, the rogue planets, the spatial tears that can destroy entire fleets?" Jake's smile grew wider. "We understand perfectly. And we'll see you on the other side." Commander Alex Thompson watched through the viewport as the last of the Council patrol ships turned back towards civilized space. The massive convoy of human vessels continued forward into the swirling darkness beyond the exclusion barrier. 300 ships carrying over 2 million people, everything humanity had built among the stars, packed into cargo holds and passenger compartments. Alex had volunteered to lead the first wave of colonists. Someone had to go first to find out if humans could actually survive in the regions the Galactic Council considered uninhabitable. He had spent 20 years mining asteroids in the outer system, so he knew something about living in dangerous places. But this was different. "Commander," called Dr. Ryan Davis from the navigation station. The young physicist looked worried as he stared at his instruments. We're getting some strange readings ahead. The space-time distortions are much worse than the Council reports indicated. Alex moved to look over Ryan's shoulder at the swirling patterns on the screen. The space beyond the barrier was filled with anomalies that made normal navigation impossible. Gravity wells that appeared and disappeared without warning. Regions where time moved faster or slower than it should. Areas where the laws of physics seemed to break down completely. How bad is it? Alex asked. Bad enough that I don't think our standard navigation computers can handle it, Ryan replied. We're going to have to plot each jump manually, and even then ... He shrugged helplessly through the ship's communication system. Alex could hear similar reports from other vessels in the convoy. The UES Independence had already lost contact with 2 of its escort ships. The civilian transport New Hope was. Our EPORTING engine failures caused by gravitational fluctuations. Fear was starting to spread through the fleet. Alex activated the ship-wide communication system. This is Commander Thompson to all vessels. I know things look scary right now, but remember why we're here. The Council didn't think we could survive in normal space either, but we proved them wrong. We're going to prove them wrong again. Colonel Maria Santos joined him at the command station. She had been in charge of organizing the entire exodus, a job that would have driven most people insane. Moving 2 million people and all their belongings across the galaxy in just 90 days was supposed to be impossible. But Maria had made it happen. The first batch of survey probes just came back, she reported. Most of them were destroyed by the anomalies, but 3 made it through. They found something interesting about 50 light years ahead. Alex looked at the data from the surviving probes. In the middle of a massive nebula, surrounded by radiation storms and gravity distortions that should have made it impossible to reach, was a stable pocket of normal space. And in that pocket was something even more surprising. Is that a planet? Alex asked. 3 planets, Maria confirmed. The middle one looks like it might be habitable. Oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, reasonable gravity. The only problem is getting there. Engineer Pete Johnson appeared at Alex's elbow, as if he had been listening to their conversation. Pete was one of those people who seemed to be everywhere at once, always working on something, always finding solutions to impossible problems. I've been thinking about that, Pete said, holding up a small device that looked like a metal cube, covered in blinking lights. I call it a quantum anchor. It uses the same principles as our communication system, but instead of sending messages, it creates a stable reference point in space-time. Alex frowned. I don't understand. Think of it like a lighthouse, Pete explained. The anomalies make it impossible to navigate because they keep changing everything around us. But if we can plant anchor points ahead of us, we can use them as guideposts. The anchors stay stable even when everything else is shifting. Dr. Davis looked up from his instruments with excitement. That's brilliant. We could leapfrog from anchor to anchor, creating a safe path through the anomalies. It took 6 days to modify the first batch of anchor devices and deploy them. 6 days of watching ships struggle against impossible forces, of losing contact with entire squadrons, only to have them reappear hours later in completely different locations. The convoy lost 12 ships during those first attempts, though. Most of the crews were rescued by other vessels, but Pete's anchors worked. Slowly, carefully, the human fleet began to navigate the maze of space-time distortions. They learned that some anomalies followed predictable patterns. Others seemed to respond to the presence of ships as if they were alive. A few areas had to be avoided completely because they contained tiers in reality itself. When they finally reached the stable pocket in the nebula, Alex couldn't believe what he saw. The 3 planets orbited a young star that provided just the right amount of heat and light. The middle planet was covered in blue oceans and green continents, It looked almost like Earth. How is this possible? Colonel Santos wondered aloud. The Council's surveys said there was nothing habitable out here. Maybe they never made it this far, Dr. Davis suggested. Maybe they took one look at the anomalies and turned back. Alex smiled. Their loss is our gain. The first landing parties found a world that was not just habitable, but rich with resources the Council had never seen. Strange crystals that could store massive amounts of energy. Metals that stayed strong, even under extreme conditions. Plants that could grow in almost any environment. Within weeks, the first permanent structures were being built. The colonists named their new home New Terra, and word began to spread back through the fleet that humans had found something amazing in the darkness beyond the barrier. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Davis made his discovery about the anomalies themselves. He had been studying the patterns for months, trying to understand how they worked. What he found changed everything. They're not random, he announced to the senior staff. The anomalies follow quantum mechanical principles. They're like ripples in the fabric of space-time, and those ripples have mathematical patterns we can predict. What does that mean for us? Alex asked. It means we can do more than just navigate around them, Davis replied with a grin. We can use them. These anomalies that the Council sees as deadly obstacles, they're actually shortcuts. If we can learn to ride them properly, we could travel distances that would take Council ships months to cover. Pete Johnson was already sketching designs for a new type of engine. We'd need to completely redesign our ships, he said. But it's possible. We could build vessels that use the anomalies as fuel, that get stronger the deeper they go into dangerous space. Alex looked out at New Terra through the viewport. The planet glowed softly in the light of its young star, surrounded by the swirling colors of the nebula. Human cities were already growing on its surface, and more ships arrived every day from the convoy. The Galactic Council had tried to exile humanity to the most dangerous region of space, thinking it would be their end. Instead, humans were discovering that they thrived in conditions that would kill most other species. They were finding resources and opportunities that the Council had never imagined, and now they were learning to turn the very dangers of this region into advantages. Alex smiled as he watched a group of children from the colony playing in the observation deck. They had been born on ships during the journey, so this dangerous region beyond the barrier was the only home they had ever known. To them, gravity storms and space-time anomalies were just part of the natural world. These children would grow up to be something the galaxy had never seen before. They would be humans who could not just survive in impossible conditions, but thrive in them. And someday, Alex realized the rest of the galaxy would have to deal with what humanity was becoming. Out here in the dark, Director Amy Chun stood at the edge of the massive construction platform, watching as the latest prototype ship emerged from the assembly bay. The vessel looked nothing like the sleek Council designs she had grown up seeing. It was angular and dark, covered in strange panels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This was humanity's fifth generation of void-capable ships, and it was unlike anything that had ever flown. 5 years had passed since the exodus from Council space. 5 years of learning, adapting, and building in the dangerous regions beyond. The exclusion barrier. What had started as a desperate flight into the unknown had become something much more significant. Humanity was changing, evolving into something new. The void drive tests are complete, reported Captain Nick Foster as he climbed down from the prototype's cockpit. His face was flushed with excitement, and his hands shook slightly from adrenaline. Amy, this thing doesn't just fly through the anomalies. It feeds on them. The more dangerous the space, the faster it goes. Amy smiled as she looked at the test results on her tablet. The new ship had just completed a journey that should have taken 3 weeks in only 2 days. It had used the space-time distortions as a power source, converting the chaotic energy into forward momentum. The technology was based on Dr. Davis's breakthrough understanding of quantum mechanics, but refined through years of trial and error. "How did it feel?" Amy asked. "Like riding lightning," Nick replied. "The ship actually gets more stable the deeper you go into the anomalies. It's completely backwards from everything we thought we knew about spaceflight." Dr. Sam Mitchell joined them on the platform, carrying a medical scanner and looking pleased with himself. Sam had been working on the Human Adaptation Project, finding ways to help people survive in the harsh conditions beyond the barrier. His latest results were even more impressive than the ship tests. "The biological modifications are working better than we hoped," Sam reported. "The volunteers who've been living in the high radiation zones for the past year aren't just surviving. They're thriving. Their bodies are adapting to process different types of energy. Some of them can actually see in spectrums that used to be invisible to humans." Amy nodded. She had undergone some of the modifications herself, though not the more extreme ones. Her enhanced vision allowed her to see the energy patterns in the void drives, which made her work much easier. But some of the volunteers had gone much further, accepting changes that would have horrified the old council medical authorities. "What about the psychological effects?" she asked. "Minimal," Sam replied. "The adapted humans report feeling more connected to their environment, more aware of energy flows and quantum fluctuations. If anything, they seem happier and more confident than baseline humans." General Tony Clark approached their group, his heavy boots ringing on the metal platform. Tony had been coordinating humanity's defense preparations, building a network of sensors and weapons throughout their territory. The general was a practical man who focused on results rather than theory. "We've got visitors," Tony announced. Long-range sensors picked up a ship approaching from the inner regions. "It's not using any council identification codes, but it's definitely not one of ours." Amy frowned. In 5 years, no one from council space had ventured beyond the barrier. The official position was that all humans had died in the dangerous regions, and most council citizens believed it. But someone was coming now. "How far out?" she asked. 6 hours at current speed," Tony replied. "The ship is struggling with the anomalies. Whoever it is, they're not equipped for this kind of space." Amy made a decision. "Nick, take the prototype. Out there. Help them navigate to the safe zone. But be careful. We don't know who they are or what they want." An hour later, Nick was guiding the unknown vessel through the maze of space-time distortions. The ship was clearly of council design, but it had been modified with additional shielding and power systems. As they approached the safe zone around New Terra, Amy received a transmission from the strange vessel. "This is Captain Zara of the exploration ship Wanderer," came a voice speaking accented English. "We are representatives of the Remnant Coalition. We request permission to land and speak with your leaders." Amy had never heard of the Remnant Coalition, but the name suggested they were not part of the main Galactic Council. She granted landing permission and assembled a small team to meet the visitors. The ship that landed was smaller than most council vessels, designed for long-range exploration rather than comfort. Its hull showed signs of radiation damage and impact scars from asteroid collisions. This was a ship that had spent years in dangerous space. Captain Zara turned out to be a member of a species Amy didn't recognize. She was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her crew included representatives from several different species, none of which Amy had encountered before. "We are the survivors," Zara explained, as they sat in the conference room aboard the orbital station. "When the Galactic Council was formed 3,000 years ago, many species chose not to join. We were deemed too independent, too dangerous, or too primitive. So we came here, too, the regions beyond the barrier. Amy leaned forward with interest. You've been living out here for 3,000 years? Not just living, Zara replied. Thriving. We have built cities on worlds the Council considers uninhabitable. We have developed technologies that work with the anomalies rather than against them. We have learned to see the dangerous regions as a source of strength rather than a threat. Dr. Mitchell spoke up. How many of you are there? 47 species in the Coalition, Zara answered. Nearly 1 billion individuals across hundreds of worlds. We have been watching your progress with great interest. You are the first newcomers to not only survive in our realm, but to understand its true nature. Amy felt a chill of excitement. Humanity was not alone out here. There was an entire civilization that had been hidden beyond the barrier, developing in secret, while the Council believed the outer regions were empty. Why reveal yourselves now? She asked. Zara's expression grew serious. Because the Council is facing a threat they cannot handle. Something is coming from beyond the galactic rim, something that feeds on the ordered, stable space the Council has created. Their traditional weapons and defenses are useless against it. And you think we can help? Amy asked. We think you might be the key, Zara replied. Your species has shown an ability to adapt and innovate that we haven't seen in centuries. You've developed void technology in just 5 years that took us decades to master. And you've done it while maintaining your essential humanity. General Clark crossed his arms. What exactly are you proposing? An alliance, Zara said. We share our knowledge and resources. You bring your innovation and adaptability. Together, we prepare for what's coming. Over the following weeks, Amy learned more about the Remnant Coalition than she had ever imagined possible. They had built cities inside asteroid fields, using the gravitational chaos as a power source. They had developed living ships that could repair themselves and adapt to any environment. They had created art and music that incorporated the quantum fluctuations of dangerous space. But most importantly, they had discovered the ancient structures scattered throughout the outer regions. Massive constructs built by a species that had vanished millions of years ago, containing technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. The builders called themselves the architects, Zara explained as they stood before a ring-shaped structure the size of a small moon. They created these devices to help species evolve and adapt to any environment. But they disappeared before they could complete their work. Amy stared at the ancient ring, feeling the strange energy patterns it generated. Do you know how to use them? We've learned some basic functions, Zara replied. But the architects designed these structures for species with capabilities we don't possess. Species that could think in quantum patterns, that could perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, that could adapt to any environment. Species like us, Amy said, understanding dawning on her. Species like you, Zara confirmed. The Council tried to destroy humanity because they feared your potential. But they may have done the galaxy a favor. Out here, beyond their restrictions and limitations, you are becoming what the architects intended. Amy looked at the ancient structure with new eyes. Humanity had been cast out of civilized space, forced to adapt or die in the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. But perhaps that had been exactly what they needed. Perhaps the Council's fear had pushed humanity toward their true destiny. The ring pulsed with ancient energy, and Amy felt something respond deep in her modified biology. The architects had built these structures for species that could thrive in impossible conditions, species that could turn chaos into order and danger into opportunity. Species like humanity was becoming. Admiral Karen White studied the star chart displaying the Vorthan border systems, her enhanced eyes tracking the movement patterns of enemy ships. 8 years had passed since humanity's exile, and everything had changed. The Iron Fleet now numbered over 500 vessels, each one designed to use the deadly anomalies of outer space as weapons and shields. What the Galactic Council had intended as humanity's tomb had become their forge. "Ma'am, we're receiving a coded transmission from the Vorthan Empire," reported Captain Luke Adams from the communications station. Luke had spent the last 2 years running covert operations in Council space, gathering intelligence and making quiet contact with species that were growing tired of Council rule. Karen raised an eyebrow. The Vorthans had been among the loudest, voices calling for humanity's banishment. Their insect-like general, Kethvar, had personally argued that humans were too dangerous to exist in civilized space. For them to be sending messages now meant something had gone very wrong in their territory. "Put it through," Karen ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a figure in Vorthan military armor. But this wasn't General Kethvar. This was someone younger, with less ornate armor and obvious signs of recent combat damage. "I am Sub-Commander Vecnol of the Vorthan Border Fleet," the alien said through the universal translator. "I speak without authorization from my superiors. But time is running short. We need your help." Karen kept her expression neutral, though internally she felt a surge of satisfaction. "Help with what, Sub-Commander?" "Rebellion," Vecnol replied simply. 3 of our outer colonies have declared independence. They're using weapons and tactics we've never seen before. Our standard military responses are completely ineffective. They're cutting through our forces like they don't exist. Captain Luke Adams leaned forward with interest. He had been monitoring Council communication channels and had picked up hints of unrest in various systems. But this was the first direct confirmation that the Council's authority was breaking down. "What makes you think we would help the Vorthan Empire?" Karen asked. "Because the rebels aren't fighting for freedom," Vecnol said urgently. "They've been infected by something from beyond the galactic rim. Something that's spreading from system to system, turning species into extensions of itself. If it isn't stopped, it will consume everything." Karen exchanged glances with her senior staff. The Remnant Coalition had warned them that something was coming from outside the galaxy, something that fed on ordered space and organized civilizations. It seemed the threat was already here. "Send us your tactical data," Karen ordered. "We'll review it and get back to you." The transmission ended, and Karen turned to Dr. Emma Brooks, her chief xenorchaeologist. Emma had been working with the Remnant Coalition to study the ancient architect structures, trying to understand their purpose and unlock their capabilities. "Emma, what do you think? Could this be the threat the Coalition warned us about?" Emma pulled up her own data on the main screen. "The pattern matches what we've found in the architect records. They called it the Gray Tide, a force that converts organic and inorganic matter into a single networked intelligence. The architects built their structures specifically to combat this threat." Commander Steve Hall, leader of humanity's elite, Ghost Squadron, spoke up from his position near the tactical display. "Admiral, my teams have been monitoring the affected Vorthan systems. The rebels aren't using any known technology. Their ships seem to be grown rather than built, and they repair damage almost instantly." Karen nodded. The Ghost Squadron had been her secret weapon for the past 3 years, using human-designed stealth ships to gather intelligence throughout Council space. They could travel through anomalies that would destroy normal vessels, making them effectively invisible to Council. "Sensors. What are our options?" she asked. "We could ignore it," suggested the tactical officer. "Let the Council deal with their own problems, and risk the infection spreading to our territory?" Emma shook her head. "The Gray Tide doesn't stop. It consumes everything in its path until there's nothing left but itself." Karen made her decision. "Luke, send a message to Sub-Commander Vecnol. Tell him we'll provide assistance, but only as a humanitarian mission. We're not rejoining the Council or accepting their authority." "Yes, ma'am," Luke replied. 3 days later, a small human task force arrived at the edge of Vorthen space. Karen had brought only 12 ships, but each one representing the pinnacle of human engineering. They could travel through space-time anomalies like highways, use quantum distortions as weapons, and repair themselves using raw energy from chaotic space. The Vorthen fleet that met them looked pathetic by comparison. Their ships showed signs of recent battle damage, and many were missing entire sections. Sub-Commander Theknal's flagship was held together with emergency patches and jury-rigged systems. "Admiral White," Theknal said when they established communication, "thank you for coming. But I must warn you, the infected systems are unlike anything we've faced before." "Show us," Karen replied. The joint fleet moved toward the first rebel system, with human ships providing escort for the damaged Vorthen vessels. As they approached the system boundary, Karen saw what Theknal meant. The planets themselves had changed, their surfaces covered with a gray organic material that pulsed with its own light. Ships grew from the planet's surfaces like fruits on a tree, then launched themselves toward any vessel that entered the system. "My God," whispered the tactical officer. The infected ships moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. They ignored conventional tactics and weapons, pressing forward regardless of damage. But when they encountered human ships, something different happened. The human vessels danced through the enemy formation like ghosts, using quantum distortions as shields and reality tears as weapons. Where conventional energy beams had no effect on the infected ships, human void weapons tore them apart at the molecular level. "How are you doing that?" Theknal asked in amazement as the human fleet destroyed 3 times their number of enemy vessels without taking significant damage. "We learned to fight in impossible conditions," Karen replied. "These ships were designed to battle space itself. Fighting other vessels is easy by comparison." Within hours, the infected system was clear of enemy ships. But the planets themselves remained changed, covered in the gray organic material that seemed to watch their every move. "This is just the beginning," Emma warned as they studied the infected worlds. "The gray tide isn't just conquering these systems. It's transforming them into something else, something that can spread further and faster." Over the following weeks, word of humanity's intervention spread throughout Council space. Species that had supported the banishment 8 years ago were now quietly requesting human assistance with their own problems. Pirates who had seemed unstoppable were driven off by single human ships. Plagues that had resisted all known treatments were cured by human medical teams. The Etherian Confederation, the most ancient and respected member of the Council, sent their own delegation to meet with Karen. Their crystalline representative floated in the conference room aboard Karen's flagship, its body pulsing with confused colors. "We miscalculated," the Etherian admitted. "When we exiled your species, we believed we were protecting galactic civilization. Instead, we may have doomed it." "How so?" Karen asked. "By forcing you into the outer regions, we inadvertently prepared you for threats we didn't know existed. You have become what the galaxy needs to survive, but we drove you away from where you were needed most." Karen leaned back in her chair. "So what are you proposing?" "A formal repeal of your species' banishment," the Etherian replied. "Full restoration of your rights and status within the galactic community. And in return, help us survive what's coming." Karen looked out through the viewport at her fleet. Human ships moved through space with a grace and power that still amazed her, using forces that Council science considered impossible. Her crews included humans who had been born in the outer regions, who could see in spectrums that didn't exist in normal space, who thought in quantum patterns that allowed them to predict and control chaotic events. "We'll consider it," she said. "Finally. But understand this, humanity has changed. We're not the same species you exiled 8 years ago. We've become something new, something adapted to thrive in conditions that would destroy most civilizations. The Etherean's body pulsed with what Karen had learned to recognize as fear. That is what we're counting on. As the diplomatic meeting concluded, Karen received a priority message from the outer regions. The ancient architect structures were activating on their own, responding to the growing threat from beyond the galactic rim. Humanity's true test was just beginning. President Dan Cooper stood before the massive holographic display showing the entire galaxy, watching as red markers spread across the outer rim like an infection. The void swarm had emerged from the dark space between galaxies 6 months ago, and nothing the Galactic Council tried could stop it. Entire star systems were going dark, consumed by machines that grew stronger with each world they devoured. "How many systems have we lost in the past week?" Dan asked Fleet Admiral Mike Taylor, who stood beside him studying tactical reports. 17 confirmed, Mike replied grimly. "And the rate is accelerating. The swarm adapts to every weapon the Council uses against it. Energy weapons just feed it more power. Kinetic weapons are absorbed and converted into more machines. Even their most advanced shields are useless." Dan nodded, his enhanced vision tracking the movement patterns of the swarm across the galactic map. 10 years of living beyond the exclusion barrier had changed him, like it had changed all humans. His body processed radiation like sunlight, his mind could perceive quantum fluctuations, and his reflexes were fast enough to pilot ships through space-time anomalies. But those changes had come with a cost. He could no longer live safely in normal space for extended periods. "What about the Council's response?" he asked. "They're finally starting to panic," reported Ambassador Jane Miller as she entered the command center. Jane had been humanity's unofficial representative to various Council species, building relationships and gathering intelligence. The Etherean Confederation sent another formal request for military assistance. The Vorthan Empire is offering to share their entire weapons database. Even the Zelani Republic is asking for help, and they've never acknowledged our existence. Dan smiled grimly. It had taken an existential threat to make the Council species realize what they had thrown away when they banished humanity. But he wasn't feeling particularly charitable toward the civilizations that had tried to exile his people to die in the dark. "Sir," called Dr. Chris Evans from the research station, "we're getting activation signals from the architect structures throughout our territory. The ancient systems are coming online automatically, responding to the swarm's presence." Dan turned to look at the data Chris was displaying. The massive ring-shaped constructs that dotted the outer regions were all showing increased energy output, their quantum resonance patterns shifting to match something approaching from intergalactic space. "The Remnant Coalition believes the architects built those structures specifically to fight the swarm," Chris continued. "They've been dormant for millions of years, waiting for this moment." "And they're responding to us?" Dan asked. "To humanity specifically," Chris confirmed. "The structures seem to recognize our evolved biology as compatible with their systems. We're the first species they've encountered that can actually interface with their technology." Admiral Taylor stepped forward. "Mr. President, we need to make a decision. Do we help the Council species, or do we focus on protecting our own territory?" Dan was quiet for a long moment, weighing the options. The logical choice was to let the Council deal with their own problems while humanity concentrated on survival. But he knew that wouldn't work in the long run. The swarm wouldn't stop with Council space. It would eventually reach human territory, and by then it would be too strong to fight. "We help them," Dan decided, "but on our terms. Jane, send a message to every Council species. Tell them humanity will provide assistance against the swarm, but only if they formally acknowledge our sovereignty and agree to a new galactic alliance based on equality rather than their old hierarchy." Jane nodded. What if they refuse? Then they can face the swarm alone, Dan replied. But I don't think they will. They're too desperate. The response came within hours. Every major council species agreed to humanity's terms without negotiation. The speed of their acceptance showed just how terrified they were of the approaching threat. 3 days later, Dan found himself aboard the UHS Defiance, flagship of the combined Human Council fleet. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, built to operate in the chaotic space near the galactic core where the swarm was strongest. Its hull was made from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and its weapons could tear holes in reality itself. Fleet status report, Dan called to Admiral Taylor. 200 human ships, 800 council vessels. Mike replied, The council ships are struggling with the gravitational distortions near the core, but our escort pattern is keeping them stable. And the swarm? Ahead of us. They've consumed everything within 50 light years of the Galactic. Center, we're looking at approximately 10 million machine entities, each one the size of a battleship. Dan felt a chill despite his enhanced physiology. The numbers were staggering. Even with humanity's advanced technology, they were outnumbered 50-1. Sir, reported the sensor officer, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the galactic core. Something big is happening in there. The main display showed the heart of the galaxy, where a massive black hole normally sat surrounded by ancient stars. But now something else was there, a structure so large it dwarfed entire solar systems. It pulsed with dark energy, and streams of mechanical entities flowed from it like water from a spring. That's the swarm source, Dan realized. They're not just consuming our galaxy, they're converting it into a breeding ground for more of themselves. Dr. Evans looked up from his instruments with excitement. The architect structures are responding. They're channeling energy directly to our ships. Our weapons are becoming more powerful as we get closer to the core. Dan felt it too, a tingling sensation as ancient technology interfaced with his enhanced biology. The ship around him seemed to come alive, its systems responding to his thoughts and intentions. He could sense the quantum patterns of space-time, could feel the flow of energy through dimensions that normal humans couldn't perceive. All ships. This is President Cooper, he announced over the fleet communication system. We're about to engage an enemy that has consumed entire galaxies. The Council's traditional tactics won't work here. But we have something the swarm has never encountered, the ability to fight in impossible conditions and win. The first wave of swarm entities came at them like a tide of living metal. They moved with perfect coordination, adapting their formations to counter every weapon the Council ships used. Energy beams were absorbed, kinetic projectiles were caught and repurposed, and defensive screens were bypassed as if they didn't exist. But the human ships were different. They danced through the enemy formation, using techniques that defied physics, their weapons tearing through swarm entities with ease. Where Council ships fought like they were in normal space, human vessels fought like they were part of the chaos itself. How are they doing that? Asked a Vorthan general over the communication channel. We learned to fight the universe itself, Admiral Taylor replied. Fighting machines is easy by comparison. A battle raged for hours with the combined fleet, slowly pushing toward the galactic core. The swarm adapted to every tactic the Council ships used, but they couldn't adapt to humanity's chaotic, quantum-based fighting style. Human ships seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from impossible angles and disappearing before the swarm could respond. But the real surprise came when they reached the core itself. The massive structure that was spawning the swarm suddenly went quiet, its energy patterns shifting to something Dan had never seen before. It's trying to communicate, Dr. Evans reported in amazement. The voice that emerged from the structure was unlike anything Dan had ever heard. Ancient, vast, and filled with a hunger that spanned galaxies. We are the harvest, it said. We? have consumed 1,000 galaxies, absorbed the knowledge and resources of countless civilizations. You cannot stop us." "We don't need to stop you," Dan replied, his voice carrying through the quantum communication system. "We just need to teach you something new." The architect structures throughout the galaxy suddenly activated at full power, their energy converging on the human fleet. Dan felt the ancient technology merge with his consciousness, showing him patterns and possibilities he had never imagined. For the first time in millions of years, the swarm encountered something it couldn't consume, a species that thrived on chaos and impossibility that could turn the very forces of destruction into tools of creation. The tide was about to turn. Chancellor Grace Turner walked through the gardens of New Geneva, the capital city of the reformed Galactic Alliance. 5 years had passed since the defeat of the Void Swarm, and the galaxy had been rebuilt from the ground up. Where once there had been rigid hierarchies and fearful isolation, now there was cooperation and shared purpose. The city around her was a marvel of combined technologies. Human quantum architecture blended with remnant living buildings and council precision engineering. Trees grew in impossible spirals, their roots tapping into dimensional energy sources, while crystalline towers reached toward the stars with their own internal gravity systems. Chancellor Turner called Admiral Tom Rodriguez as he approached. Through the quantum-shifted pathways that allowed people to walk between distant parts of the city in seconds. Tom had been instrumental in creating the new Alliance Defense Force, combining the best elements of human adaptability with the knowledge of 47 different species. "Any word from the Outer Rim surveys?" Grace asked. "The exploration fleets have mapped 3 new spiral arms beyond our previous boundaries," Tom reported. "Dr. Jackson's teams have found 17 habitable worlds and 6 more architect ring structures." "The galaxy is much larger than we thought," Grace smiled. The old Galactic Council had been content to control a small fraction of the galaxy, keeping other species confined to what they considered safe space. But humans had proven that the dangerous regions held the greatest opportunities. Now, with humanity's guidance, the Alliance was expanding into areas that had been considered impossible to explore. "What about the integration programs?" she asked. "Better than expected," Tom replied. "We have over 300 mixed-species colonies now. The Vorthan military units are adapting well to human tactics, and the Etherian researchers are making breakthrough discoveries using quantum-enhanced thinking patterns." Grace nodded with satisfaction. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many council species had struggled to adapt to human methods, which required accepting uncertainty and learning to thrive in chaotic conditions. But those who made the effort were becoming something new, hybrid cultures that combined the best aspects of multiple civilizations. They paused at an observation platform that looked out over the training grounds where new Alliance defense forces practiced. Grace watched as human instructors taught Vorthan soldiers how to use void space maneuvers, while remnant engineers showed council technicians how to build living ships that could repair themselves. "Any problems with the former council leadership?" Grace asked. Tom's expression grew more serious. "A few. General Kethvar and his supporters are still in detention on Holding Station Alpha. They refuse to accept that the old ways failed and keep trying to organize resistance movements. The Zelani nobility isn't much better. They can't understand why humanity won't simply take over and establish our own empire." "Because that's not who we are," Grace replied. "We learn to survive by working together, by adapting to impossible conditions, by finding strength in diversity. An empire based on domination would make us no better than the Swarm." She thought back to the final battle at the Galactic Core, when President Cooper had faced the Harvest intelligence that controlled the Void Swarm. Instead of trying to destroy it, humanity had done something unprecedented. They had taught it to evolve beyond its need to consume. The swarm entities had been transformed from destroyers into builders, using their vast knowledge to help repair the damage they had caused. "Ma'am," interrupted Dr. Paul Jackson as he approached with his usual enthusiasm. Paul led the Galactic Research Consortium, the Alliance's primary scientific organization. "We've made another discovery in the ancient architect databases. It seems they left us instructions for something called the Great Work." "What kind of instructions?" Grace asked. "A project to prepare the entire galaxy for something even bigger than the swarm," Paul explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "According to the records, our galaxy is just one small part of a cosmic community. The architects were building a network to connect different galaxies, to share knowledge and resources across impossible distances." Grace felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. Humanity had gone from being exiled outcasts to leaders of their own galaxy in just 15 years. Now it seemed they were being invited to participate in something even grander. "How long would such a project take?" she asked. "Generations," Paul replied. "But the architects left all the tools we need. The ring structures can be linked together to create galaxy-spanning communication networks. The quantum enhancement technologies can be used to help entire species evolve beyond their current limitations. And humanity's ability to thrive in chaotic conditions makes us perfect coordinators for the project." Ambassador Lisa Morgan joined their group, having just returned from the Outer Rim territories. Lisa had been overseeing the establishment of new colonies in regions that had never been explored by the old council. "The frontier settlements are reporting something interesting," Lisa announced. "They're detecting signals from beyond the galactic edge. Not threatening like the swarm, but definitely artificial. It looks like other galaxies are trying to establish contact." Grace looked up at the stars visible through the transparent dome above the city. Each point of light represented thousands of worlds, millions of species, countless opportunities for growth and discovery. The old council had been afraid of the unknown, content to hide in their safe regions while the galaxy's true potential remained unexplored. But humanity had learned that the most dangerous places often held the greatest rewards. They had been forged in the chaos beyond the exclusion barrier, shaped by conditions that would have destroyed most species. Now they were ready to help the entire galaxy take the next step. "Lisa, prepare a response to those signals," Grace ordered. "Let them know we're ready to begin formal contact. Tom, start expanding the Defense Force recruitment programs. We'll need ships and crews capable of intergalactic travel. Paul, accelerate the Great Work Project timeline. If we're going to represent our galaxy in a cosmic community, we need to be at our best." As her advisors hurried off to implement her orders, Grace remained on the observation platform, watching the sun set over the capital. The city below buzzed with activity as humans, Vorthans, Etherians, and dozens of other species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. A group of children ran past on the walkway below, some human, some alien, all laughing and playing together. They had been born into this new galaxy where cooperation was normal and exploration was encouraged. To them, the idea of species being separated by fear and prejudice seemed as ancient as the architect. Ruins, Grace smiled as she watched them. These children would grow up to crew the ships that explored other galaxies, to make contact with civilizations beyond current imagination, to push the boundaries of what was possible even further than their parents had. The old Galactic Council had tried to exile humanity because they were afraid of change, afraid of species that didn't fit into their rigid categories. But they had unknowingly done the galaxy the greatest favor possible. By forcing humanity into the most dangerous regions of space, they had created the one species capable of leading the galaxy into its next phase of evolution, not above her. First stars began to appear in the darkening sky. But Grace knew they weren't just stars anymore. They were destinations, Opportunities, stepping stones to adventures that hadn't even been imagined yet. Humanity had been banished by the Galactic Council, but they had conquered the stars instead. And now, they were ready to help everyone else do the same.